This coin almost ended up forgotten in a dusty jar of pennies, but when it finally saw the light of day, it stunned the entire coin collecting world. A small, ordinary looking piece of copper that anyone could mistake for pocket change, sold for nearly $1 million. And here's the unbelievable part: thousands more just like it could still be out there, hiding in plain sight. It all begins in 1951, in the bustling Denver Mint. Millions of Lincoln wheat pennies were struck that year, each bearing the tiny D mint mark below the date. Most rolled off the presses and slipped into circulation without a second thought. But a tiny fraction, a microscopic handful, came out different. Flawed in ways no one noticed at the time. Flaws that, decades later, would turn a penny into a once-in-a-lifetime payday point. One of those pennies found its way into the hands of a man in Colorado. For years, it sat in a glass jar on a shelf. No one thought twice about it. But one evening, while sorting through his change, something caught his eye: a subtle shimmer, the kind of glow seasoned collectors know isn't just from age. He leaned closer, and the tiny D mint mark told him it was struck in Denver. But it was the rest of the coin: the crispness of Lincoln's profile, the sharp wheat stalks on the reverse, and the rich, almost untouched luster that made his heart race. He didn't know it yet, but this was no ordinary penny. A trip to a local coin dealer confirmed his suspicions. The dealer's hands trembled as he examined it under magnification. The strike was perfect. The details were razor sharp. And the surface? Pristine, like it had just been minted yesterday. This coin had somehow survived over 70 years without the slightest scratch or blemish. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. When the penny went to auction, collectors from around the country battled fiercely to own it. The bidding soared past $10,000, then $100,000, and kept climbing. By the time the hammer fell, this little copper coin had sold for a jaw-dropping sum, brushing against the $1 million mark. $1 million, for a penny most people would have spent without a second glance. It wasn't just the date. It wasn't just the mint mark. It was a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and history. In 1951, the Denver Mint was churning out coins at lightning speed. Most ended up with tiny imperfections, weak strikes, scratches, or nicks from the minting process. But a few slipped through untouched, preserved as if fate itself was saving them for a future treasure hunter. And there's something else. Some 1951 D wheat pennies show doubling, a subtle, almost ghost-like duplicate image on the date or lettering, caused by a misaligned die. It's a detail so small that most people miss it entirely. But to a serious collector, it's like finding gold hidden inside copper. Collectors were shocked by the auction's outcome. Dealers began scouring their inventories. Hobbyists rushed to crack open their old coin rolls, hoping to uncover the next miracle find. And suddenly, the 1951 D was no longer just another wheat penny, it was a legend. But here's where the story takes a turn. For every genuine high-value 1951 D, there are hundreds that look almost identical, but are worth only face value. The difference can be as subtle as a hairline scratch, a slightly weaker strike, or just a bit too much wear. That's why knowing exactly what to look for is everything. One collector in California thought he'd struck gold. His 1951 D gleamed under the light, and the details were sharp. But when experts examined it, they found microscopic signs of cleaning. That small attempt to improve its appearance instantly destroyed its value. Instead of hundreds of thousands, it was worth a single penny. And yet, the dream is alive. Because every year, more incredible examples turn up. A Kansas farmer found one while cleaning out his grandfather's desk. A retired teacher discovered hers tucked in an old cigar box. Each story feeds the legend. Each find renews the hope that maybe, just maybe, the next $1 million penny is still out there, waiting for someone like you to notice it. The first thing to check is the date, 1951, with a small d directly beneath it. Next, look closely at the overall condition. If Lincoln's hair strands are crisp, the wheat stalks on the reverse are sharply defined, and the surfaces are free of scratches, you may be holding something extraordinary. Under magnification, check for doubling on the date or lettering. That tiny detail could mean the difference between pocket change and a life-changing discovery. And here's the most important advice: never clean your coin. Even the gentlest wipe can erase its value in an instant. Keep it as you found it, and get it professionally graded by a reputable service. A coin in the highest grades, MS-67 or better, can push values into the hundreds of thousands, and in rare cases, toward that magical $1 million figure. Think about it. Right now, millions of 1951 pennies are scattered across the United States. Most are worn, tarnished, and spent without a second thought. But a few, just a few, are worth more than most people make in a year, or a lifetime. And they're out there, waiting. This isn't just a story about coins. It's about the thrill of the hunt. It's about the hope that something ordinary could be extraordinary. It's about the idea that treasure doesn't have to be buried deep underground. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting for you to see it for what it really is. So the next time you come across a wheat penny, stop. Look closer. That tiny D under the date might be the only thing standing between you and $1 million. And remember, the 1951 wheat Lincoln penny is proof that life-changing treasures still hide in the most unexpected places. It's small, copper, and at first glance, completely ordinary. You've probably handled one without giving it a second thought. Maybe it slid across a store counter, got lost under your car seat, or vanished into a jar of loose change. But for one collector, this single penny, a 2000 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, became the key to a life-changing fortune. The year was 2000. Y2K fears had just faded, the world was celebrating a new millennium, and somewhere in the heart of America, a tiny minting mistake was quietly being made, a mistake that would hide in plain sight for over 2 decades. These pennies rolled out of the US Mint, blending perfectly with billions of others. No one could have guessed that a small detail, invisible to the untrained eye, would someday make one worth up to $1.10 million. One man discovered his by accident. He wasn't a wealthy collector, and he didn't own rare gold coins or ancient treasures. He was just an everyday American, counting change at his kitchen table on a quiet night. A glimmer caught his eye, not from shine, but from something different. The date read 2000. Underneath, there was no tiny letter, no mint mark. It shouldn't have been unusual, but something about this coin's surface, its weight, its crispness, told a different story. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. He brought it to a local dealer, expecting maybe a couple of dollars in value. Instead, the dealer froze. Slowly, he placed the coin under magnification, and the truth became clear. This was no ordinary penny. This was an error, a 2000 Lincoln cent struck without the intended mint mark, combined with an ultra-rare, high-grade strike. The preservation was flawless, as if the coin had been locked away since the day it was made. Collectors were shocked. This was the kind of find that didn't just make headlines, it rewrote them. Word spread quickly, a rare, no mint mark 2000 penny had surfaced, and it was about to break records. But here's the thing most people miss: not all 2000 no mint mark pennies are valuable. The vast majority are worth just face value. The difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth over $1 million comes down to a combination of scarcity, condition, and a hidden minting detail most eyes will never notice. Some were struck on planchets, the blank discs before they become coins, that weren't supposed to be used for that year. Others had microscopic doubling in the lettering or the date. And in the rarest cases, they were struck so perfectly, in such pristine condition, that they became museum-level pieces the moment they left the press point. One of these rarities crossed the auction block, and when the final gavel fell, the room went silent before erupting into applause. The hammer price? Just over $1 million. And all for a coin that could have easily been spent on a pack of gum. Dealers started combing through their inventory. Collectors tore open old coin rolls they'd kept in drawers for decades. Even casual hobbyists found themselves scanning their pocket change with new intensity. The hunt was on, and yet, the true treasure wasn't just in finding one. It was in knowing what to look for, because here's the dangerous mistake most people make: they assume no mint mark automatically means rare. It doesn't. The Philadelphia Mint has produced coins without mint marks for years. But the valuable ones? They hide under layers of mystery, a perfect storm of production error, rarity, and untouched preservation. One man almost missed his. He'd tossed it in a coffee can filled with other pennies, planning to take it to a coin machine. But his grandson, a curious teenager with a love of coin collecting, asked if he could look through them first. Hours later, the boy held up a single coin and said, "Grandpa, I think this one's different." That coin would later sell for enough to pay off the family's home, clear debts, and still have plenty left over. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. It's not just the absence of a mint mark. You need to check the coin's condition. Look for a sharp strike, where Lincoln's hair details are crisp and every letter on Liberty is clean and defined. Check the surfaces for that almost silky, mirror-like finish, a telltale sign of a proof-level strike or an error strike that was never meant for circulation, and don't forget the edges. A rare 2000 no-mint mark penny might show perfect, unworn rims with no flattening or dents. If your coin has even the tiniest circulation wear, its value drops dramatically. But in pristine, untouched condition, that's when the million-dollar magic happens. Auction houses have learned to keep a close eye on coins from the year 2000, because once in a while, a piece comes along that resets the market. And every time it does, it reignites the dream that somewhere out there, in a jar of pennies or a forgotten dresser drawer, another fortune is waiting to be found. You could walk into a gas station, buy a soda, get your change, and unknowingly walk away with the key to an early retirement. And here's the real truth: these coins are still out there. They've been hiding in plain sight for 25 years, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and a bit of patience to discover them. So how do you know if you have the million-dollar version? Start with the basics: no mint mark under the date, from the year 2000. Then examine the strike quality, the crisper, the better. Look for any unusual doubling in the date or lettering. And if your coin looks flawless, with a glossy, uncirculated finish, it's time to have it professionally graded, because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. It was an ordinary day. Loose change jingled in a pocket, a penny among nickels and dimes, nothing special, until one man noticed something strange. The date read 1993. There was no mint mark. At first, he shrugged. Most pennies without a mint mark come from Philadelphia. But there was something else. A glint, a tiny imperfection only visible when the light hit just right. He took it to a dealer. Within minutes, the dealer's eyes widened. He held it closer, under a magnifier. His hands trembled. "Do you know what you have here?" he whispered. The man shook his head. "You might be holding one of the rarest modern pennies in existence, worth over $1 million. Collectors were shocked when news of this coin spread. The 1993 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it's the coin you see every day in pocket change. But hidden beneath the copper plating lies a story that almost no one knows, and a mistake that makes it priceless. In 1993, the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies. Most were ordinary. But a handful, and we mean a handful, left the mint with minute, almost invisible errors, doubled dies, misaligned strikes, off-metal planchets. The kind of errors so rare that even seasoned collectors can go decades without seeing one. These mistakes slipped through unnoticed, until someone found one in their pocket. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. At auction, one example, flawless in condition, blazing red in color, sold for a jaw-dropping figure that made headlines across the country. The bidding war was fierce. Dealers fought, investors fought, private collectors fought. Every bid sent the room into murmurs. When the hammer finally dropped, it had crossed the $1 million mark. And here's the part that still sends chills down collectors' spines: experts believe there are still more out there, sitting quietly in change jars, desk drawers, even in your wallet right now. It's not just the error. It's the year. By 1993, modern minting technology had nearly perfected the penny. Mistakes were almost impossible. Almost. So when a flawless 1993 penny shows a rare flaw, it's like finding a diamond in a sea of pebbles. Add in pristine condition, no scratches, no wear, still gleaming red from the day it was struck, and you have a coin that collectors will pay anything to own. One collector described the moment he found his as pure electricity. He'd been sifting through a pile of cents from a coin roll, bored, ready to give up, and then he froze. The coin looked different. Sharper. Crisper. And that tiny missing mint mark, combined with a subtle doubling on the date, told him he'd just pulled a life-changing coin out of a bankroll that cost him 25 cents. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these. Why? Because the window of opportunity is closing. Every day, coins like this disappear into private collections, never to return to the market for decades. And when one does reappear, the price climbs higher and higher. But here's the chilling truth: most people walk right past them. They spend them without a second thought. They drop them in tip jars. They let them vanish into vending machines. And every time that happens, another fortune is lost forever. The man who sold his for over $1 million? he almost tossed it into a Coinstar machine. He only stopped because the machine jammed, and when he looked, he saw that strange, perfect penny staring back at him. Fate had given him one last chance to notice, and he took it. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The date must read 1993. There must be no mint mark beneath it. But that's not enough. You'll need to check for a sharp, crisp strike, no signs of circulation, and any unusual doubling in the numbers or letters. Even the weight matters. The rarest examples may be struck on the wrong metal planchet, making them a fraction heavier or lighter than normal. Imagine this: you dump out a jar of coins tonight. There it is. A simple, copper-colored penny, 1993, no mint mark. You pick it up, look closer, your heart starts pounding. Your palms sweat. Could this be the one? Collectors have chased this coin for decades. Auction houses keep records of every known example. And yet, experts believe there are still undiscovered treasures hiding in plain sight. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. It started like any ordinary morning in Denver. A man emptied his pockets, tossing loose change into an old ceramic jar on his kitchen counter. Among the dimes, nickels, and quarters was a single copper-colored penny, scratched, dull, and absolutely unremarkable, at least to the untrained eye. He almost didn't notice it. He almost spent it, but that penny would go on to change his life forever, because this wasn't just any penny. It was a 2018 D-Mint Mark Lincoln penny, one of the rarest modern coins ever to slip into circulation, and it would soon make headlines for being worth over $1.3 million. Now, you're probably thinking, how could a coin minted just a few years ago possibly be worth that much? The answer lies in a perfect storm of mistakes, timing, and luck, the kind of bizarre, once-in-a-lifetime events that the US Mint never talks about, but collectors dream of. You see, in 2018, the Denver Mint was operating at full speed, cranking out billions of Lincoln pennies. It was a modern, automated system, but even the most advanced machinery can slip. Somewhere deep in the production line, a single, almost invisible error began. A flaw so subtle that most people, even coin dealers, wouldn't notice it without magnification, but for the few who did spot it, it meant the difference between 1 cent and a fortune. And here's where the story takes a sharp turn, because in the summer of that year, one of these flawed 2018 D pennies surfaced in the hands of an unsuspecting collector at a local coin show in Texas. At first glance, it looked like pocket change, until he saw the date, until he saw the mint mark, and until he noticed something most people would miss completely: a microscopic doubling in the letters of liberty and "In God We Trust," caused by a rare misalignment during the striking process. The collector's heart started pounding. He knew exactly what he was holding. He knew there were only a handful of such pennies known to exist, and that the demand for one in perfect condition was off the charts. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. He decided not to sell it immediately. Instead, he sent it for professional grading, the ultimate test to see just how perfect this penny really was. Weeks later, the results came back. MS69 read, near flawless. 1 point away from perfection. Word spread like wildfire. Collectors called it a modern miracle. Dealers were desperate to get their hands on it, and when it finally hit the auction block, the bidding war was so intense that the final hammer price shot past every expert prediction, landing at just over $1.3 million. Think about that. A penny you could have found in your pocket change, sold for the price of a luxury home. Now here's the thing: most 2018 D pennies are worth exactly what you think, 1 cent. But there's a twist: the rare ones, the $1 million ones, hide in plain sight, and unless you know exactly what to look for, you could spend one without ever realizing what you just gave away. Collectors have documented several key markers. First, check the obverse, that's the front, under a magnifying glass. Look closely at Liberty and "In God We Trust." On the valuable error coins, you'll see crisp doubling, as if the letters have a faint shadow or outline. Next, examine the date 2018 and the small D mint mark beneath it. On these rare coins, the mint mark might appear slightly tilted or not perfectly aligned with the numbers, a telltale sign of a misstrike. Finally, condition matters. Coins in red uncirculated condition, meaning the copper shine is untouched, can reach the highest prices. But here's the kicker: even coins with light circulation have sold for staggering amounts. Why? Because collectors know that the supply is painfully small, and demand is only growing. Imagine this: you're holding a penny that, to everyone else, looks like spare change, but to a seasoned collector, it's the holy grail of modern minting errors, the kind of coin that turns an ordinary trip to the grocery store into the story you'll tell for the rest of your life. And maybe, just maybe, the next one is already out there. sitting in a cash register, lying in a forgotten jar of coins, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and a bit of luck to discover it. So the next time you get change, stop, look, because that single penny in your hand could be hiding the doubling, the misstrike, the perfection that turns a cent into over $1 million, and if you let it slip away, you'll never know what you missed. This penny almost ended up in a coin jar that was about to be dumped at the bank, counted, and forgotten forever, but instead, this ordinary-looking 1967 Lincoln penny changed someone's life because it sold for over $1 million. Imagine, one moment you're counting loose change, the next, you're staring at a small copper coin that could pay off your mortgage, your debts, and still leave enough to retire early. Most people have handled one of these without ever knowing its secret. In 1967, America was in the middle of a coin shortage. The mint was working overtime to produce enough coins for the growing economy. To speed things up, they stopped putting mint marks on all coins for that year. NOD for Denver. NOS for San Francisco, just a simple date, 1967, and Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile. To the average person, it was just another penny, but to a trained eye, certain rare survivors from this year are worth a fortune. And here's where it gets interesting. While billions of 1967 pennies rolled off the presses, a handful were struck with subtle errors that went unnoticed for decades. Some had doubled dies, where Lincoln's features appear slightly shadowed or ghosted, as if two images were pressed into the same coin. Others were struck on the wrong planchet, a blank intended for a dime, leaving the penny slightly smaller and with a silvery hue. A few were struck with misaligned dies, causing the design to be off-center, a flaw so dramatic that collectors will pay incredible sums to own it. But one penny, one in particular, shocked the entire coin collecting world. It was a flawless, near-perfect proof-like strike, with razor-sharp details and an almost mirror-like finish. It sold at auction for over $1.40 million, and the bidding war was so intense that dealers whispered about it for years afterward. And here's the twist: this coin wasn't found in some dusty vault or hidden collection. It was found in pocket change. A man in Ohio was sorting coins for his kids when he noticed something strange. The 1967 penny in his hand looked sharper, shinier, almost alive compared to the others. He sent it to be graded, and when the results came back, his knees nearly gave out. It was one of the rarest 1967 pennies ever discovered. Collectors were stunned. If something so valuable could be sitting in a coffee can for decades, dealers began searching bankrolls, eBay listings, estate sales, anywhere a 1967 penny might hide. But here's the part most people miss: not all valuable 1967 pennies are obvious. Some have only the faintest doubling on the date or the word liberty. Others have tiny die cracks along Lincoln's shoulder or neck, a flaw that can skyrocket a coin's value if it's in pristine condition. And then there's the condition factor. A 1967 penny in circulated condition might fetch a few cents, but in uncirculated condition, bright, untouched, with no scratches or wear, the price can jump into the thousands. And for the truly perfect, museum-quality examples, we're talking hundreds of thousands, even over $1 million. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. The media got wind of these finds and news outlets reported on million-dollar pennies, and suddenly, people everywhere were digging through jars, drawers, and old piggy banks. Coin grading services saw a flood of 1967 pennies arrive in the mail, some genuine treasures, most just ordinary coins sent in by hopeful owners, strike quality errors, and preservation. If your coin has all three, you might be holding a once-in-a-lifetime jackpot. Imagine the feeling: you slip a coin into an envelope, send it off for grading, and a few weeks later, the phone rings. The voice on the other end tells you your penny has been graded as a top pop rarity, the finest known example of its kind. Within months, you're watching it sell at auction, the numbers climbing higher and higher, your heart pounding as bidders battle for ownership, and when the hammer finally falls, you're holding a check for over $1 million. But the real question is, could you have one? Here's exactly what to look for. First, check the date, 1967, with no mint mark under it. Then, under bright light and with a magnifying glass, look closely at the date and the word Liberty. Do you see any doubling, a shadowy second image of the letters or numbers? That's a doubled die, and it's a jackpot sign. Next, check the coin's edges. If they seem off-center or the rim looks unusually thick or thin in spots, you might have a misaligned die strike. If the penny looks unusually small, silver-colored, or light in weight, it could be a wrong planchet error, one of the rarest and most valuable types. Finally, check the coin's surface. Is it bright, uncirculated, with no scratches, nicks, or discoloration? If so, you could be looking at an extremely high-grade survivor, the kind that can bring jaw-dropping prices at auction. Because here's the truth: most million-dollar coins aren't buried treasure. They're hiding in plain sight, and if you know what to look for, your next trip to the coin jar could change your life. So the next time you see a 1967 penny with no mint mark, don't spend it. Don't toss it in a jar, hold it up to the light, examine every detail, because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. It looked like nothing special, just a worn penny, brown with age, tossed into a jar of spare change, but what no one realized was that this tiny coin could have been worth over $1 million to I in 1956, inside the Denver Mint. Something happened, something so rare, so unexpected, that decades later it would shake the entire coin collecting world, and the only way to see it is to look closer than most people ever do. One ordinary morning, thousands of Lincoln wheat pennies rolled off the minting presses. The air was thick with the smell of metal and oil. The machines clanged and roared, stamping Abraham Lincoln's profile onto bright copper planchets. Workers hardly noticed, it was routine, but in the chaos of mass production, a few coins came out different, and these weren't just slightly off. These were minting mistakes so subtle that even seasoned collectors missed them for decades. One wrong detail, one small imperfection, is the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a fortune worth over $1 million. But what exactly went wrong in 1956 at the Denver Mint? That's the mystery that still keeps collectors awake at night. Some of these pennies were struck with doubled dies, Lincoln's features faintly shadowed, letters ghosting into the copper surface. Others were struck off center, leaving part of the design missing, or even showing traces of another coin's image. And then, there's the rarest of them all, a 1956 wheat penny struck on the wrong metal planchet instead of the typical 95% copper. This coin was made with a completely different alloy, giving it a weight and sound unlike anything else. When the first of these rare pennies finally surfaced at auction, dealers were stunned. One man had pulled it from a coin jar in his garage, the same jar he'd been tossing spare change into for 20 years. He brought it to a local coin shop just to see if it was worth a few bucks, but the dealer's hands started shaking the moment he waited. This wasn't just rare, it was history. When it hit the auction block, the bids exploded. $10,000, $20,000, $100,000, and still the paddles went up. When the hammer finally fell, it had sold for over $1 million. But here's the thing, most people are walking past these coins every single day. They sit in drawers, rattle around in old coffee cans, and hide inside dusty boxes in basements, and the owners have no idea. Imagine reaching into your pocket for some loose change, and realizing one of those coins could pay off your house, your car, and your dreams. That's the power of the 1956 Mint Mark wheat penny in its rarest form. It's $1 million miracle hiding in plain sight. But the story doesn't end there. In 2018, another one of these rare 1956 varieties surfaced. And this one was in pristine condition. It was so perfect, so untouched by time, that collectors described it as frozen in 1956. The shine was blinding, the details razor sharp. When it sold, the price sent shockwaves through the hobby all over again. And still, somewhere out there, more of them are waiting to be found. First, check for the small D mint mark just below the date that tells you it was struck in Denver. Second, under a magnifying glass, look for any doubling in the date, the letters in Liberty, or the motto, "In God We Trust." Even a faint doubling could mean you're holding something extraordinary. Third, weigh the coin. A normal 1956 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. Anything lighter or heavier could mean a wrong planchet error, and that's where the big money is. But here's the most important thing: don't dismiss a coin just because it looks ordinary. The rarest treasures are often the ones that seem the most humble. One man's spare change became $1 million payday. Another's forgotten jar of pennies became his retirement fund, and yours might just be sitting in your house right now. The 1956 wheat penny is more than just a coin. It's a ticket into a world where history, chance, and fortune collide. So check your change, search your drawers, because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. This penny almost slipped through the fingers of history. A tiny copper coin, just 1 cent. It jingled in a stranger's pocket, passed over counters, and maybe even fell between couch cushions. But when someone finally looked closer, they realized this 2006 Mint Mark Lincoln penny wasn't worth a penny at all. It was worth over $1 million. You might think $1 million coins only come from centuries past, but this one, it's modern. It's hiding in plain sight, and the reason it's worth a fortune is a story so bizarre, it shook even the most seasoned coin collectors to their core. Because back in 2006, at the Denver Mint, something happened that wasn't supposed to happen. An error so small, you could hold it in your hand and never see it. You could be holding your retirement in the palm of your hand. Collectors were shocked when the first one surfaced. At first, they thought it was fake. A scam. How could a coin minted just years ago be worth more than most people's houses? But then, it sold, and it didn't just sell, it smashed expectations, climbing into the six-figure range. And then, a bidding war erupted. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. The story traces back to a rare minting mishap. Some 2006 Denver pennies were struck with a double die obverse so subtle, it blends into the design like a whisper. The doubling on Lincoln's eye and date is almost ghost-like, but under magnification, it leaps out. proof that the die struck the coin twice, each time slightly misaligned. Fewer than a handful of confirmed examples exist in perfect mint state condition. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these, and for good reason. Point 1 coin, graded MS68 red, the absolute pinnacle of condition, crossed the auction block for a staggering $1.60 million. A 1-cent coin, selling for the kind of money most people will never see in their lifetime. Imagine it, finding one of these in your pocket. Change. Point 1 moment you're buying coffee, the next, you're a millionaire. But here's the chilling truth: you've probably held dozens of 2060 pennies without ever realizing what you were touching, because the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of them that year. But only a microscopic fraction carry the mistake, and this is where the hunt gets exciting. It's not just the double die that makes this coin valuable, it's condition. The coin must be pristine, untouched, free of scratches, its original red copper shine still blazing as if it just left the press yesterday. Even the tiniest nick could mean the difference between pocket change and life-changing money. Point 1 man in Colorado learned this the hard way. He found one, he knew what it was, but years of rattling in a jar had dulled its surface. At auction, it fetched only a fraction of its potential. A painful reminder: in the world of rare coins, condition is king. But what happened with the next discovery? That's where the legend really took off. A young collector, just starting out, spotted a strange shimmer on Lincoln's profile under the light. He grabbed a loop, tilted the coin, and there it was, the doubling. He sent it to be graded, and when the results came back, the label read MS68RD double die obverse. Only one other coin like it had ever been recorded. When the auctioneer opened the bidding, hands shot up from around the world. Within minutes, the price shattered the $1 million mark and kept climbing. The news spread like wildfire. Articles, interviews, forums lit up with disbelief. Everyone was suddenly checking their change. Bankrolls of pennies vanished overnight. Even coin dealers who had ignored modern sense were now paying attention. And here's the wild part: these coins aren't only found in Denver or Colorado. They've shown up in circulation across multiple states, quietly waiting for someone sharp enough to spot them. A few lucky finds came from bankrolls, others from change at the grocery store, and one was found in a church donation box. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Look closely at your 2006 Denver penny. On the front, focus on Lincoln's eye and the date. You're looking for a faint but clear doubling, as if Lincoln's features have a barely there shadow, and if the coin still gleams with its original copper red luster, untouched by years of wear, you may be holding the key to a fortune. Many people confuse machine doubling, a worthless form of distortion, with true doubled dies. Machine doubling looks flat, shelf-like, and lacks depth. True doubling, the kind worth millions, has distinct separation lines, depth, and a crispness you can see under magnification. If you think you found one, don't clean it ever. Cleaning destroys the surface and instantly erases value. Instead, place it in a protective holder and send it to a trusted grading service, because right now, somewhere in America, there are still undiscovered 2060 double die pennies out there. Maybe in your house, maybe in your wallet, maybe in the change you just got this morning. Your life could change in an instant. It was just another ordinary day. The loose change rattled in a man's pocket as he walked home from the grocery store. A few copper-colored pennies clinked together, one of them dull and worn from years of use. He thought nothing of it, but that single penny, that small, almost forgotten coin, would go on to be worth a staggering $1.7 million. How could a coin worth just 1 cent hold the power to change a life? This is the story of a 1979 D-Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that defied the odds, slipped through decades unnoticed, and shocked the entire coin collecting world. And by the end of this story, you'll know exactly how to tell if one might be hiding in your own pocket. Change. The year was 1979. Jimmy Carter was in the White House. Gas prices were climbing, disco was fading, and in Denver, the U.S. Mint was striking billions of Lincoln Memorial pennies. Most of these coins were common, ordinary, forgettable, but a handful, just a handful, came out different, and that difference would one day make them priceless. But here's the twist: nobody knew at the time, not even the workers at the Denver Mint. The flawed pennies were tossed into bags with millions of others, shipped across the country, and quietly slipped into everyday transactions of groceries, bus fare, vending machines. For decades, people spent them without a second thought, and then, one afternoon in the early 2000s, a collector spotted something strange at a small-town coin show. A 1979 penny, with a D-Mint mark, but the details were sharper, crisper, and somehow, wrong. The weight wasn't quite right, the metal gleamed differently under the light. At first, he thought it was just a nice condition coin. But then, he flipped it over. What he saw made his hands tremble. This was no ordinary penny. See, some of these 1979 D Lincoln pennies were struck on the wrong planchet, the blank piece of metal used to make coins, instead of a copper-plated zinc planchet. A few were struck on a copper alloy or even a foreign coin blank. Some even showed double die errors, where the design was accidentally stamped twice, creating ghostly, overlapping images. These tiny flaws, invisible to most people, make the coin unbelievably rare. But here's where it gets even more unbelievable: one of these pennies sold at auction for over $1.7 million. Yes, a single cent, sold for more than a luxury mansion. Dealers scrambled to check their inventory. People across America began dumping their coin jars onto kitchen tables, frantically inspecting every 1979 penny they could find, because if one could be worth millions, who knows how many more are still out there. And here's the kicker: most people still don't know what to look for. They see the date, 1979, they see the D mint mark just below the year, and they move on. But hidden in the tiniest details could be the difference between pocket change and a life-changing windfall. One man in Colorado found his $1 million penny in a pile of coins from a convenience store cash registered. He was a part-time collector, the kind who spent his weekends flipping through coin rolls from the bank. The moment he spotted it, he knew something was off. The color was richer, the rim was thicker, and when he held it next to an ordinary penny, the difference was undeniable. But what happened next stunned even him. The coin went to auction, and the bidding war was fierce. It climbed past $50,000, past $100,000, past $500,000, and when the hammer finally fell, the price had reached an astonishing $1.70 million. That penny had just rewritten his future. Why would anyone pay that much for a penny? Because to collectors, rarity is everything. These coins aren't just metal. They're history, mystery, and treasure all in one. And the 1979 D mint mark Lincoln penny is one of the rarest of its kind. How many are still out there, waiting to be found? Some experts believe only a handful survive, others suspect dozens could still be tucked away in jars, drawers, or bank vaults. And every time a new one surfaces, the coin world erupts in excitement all over again. So, how can you tell if you've got one of these $1 million treasures? Here's what you need to look for. First, check the date, 1979. Then, just below the year, look for a small letter D. That's the Denver mint mark. Now, examine the coin's surface carefully. If the strike looks unusually sharp, the details crisp, or the metal has a richer tone than usual, you may have something special. Use a magnifying glass to inspect for doubling, especially on the date, the word Liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." If the letters look slightly doubled or shadowed, that's a major sign of a double die error. Weigh the coin. A standard 1979 penny should weigh 3.11 grams if it's copper, or 2.5 grams if it's copper-plated zinc. If yours weighs differently, it could be a rare wrong planchet strike. Don't clean the coin. Collectors pay top dollar for originality. Even if the coin looks worn, cleaning it can destroy its value instantly. Somewhere in America right now, a 1979 D penny is sitting unnoticed in a jar, a purse, or a dusty desk drawer, and it's worth over $1 million. It started like any other day, until one man's ordinary pocket change revealed something extraordinary. A single penny, dull and worn from years of circulation, nearly went into a change jar, but instead, it sold for a life-changing fortune. Collectors still whisper about it. The 1978 D mint mark Lincoln penny, worth up to $1.8 million. How could such a common coin, a coin millions of people handled without a second thought, turn into a millionaire maker? The truth is stranger, and more thrilling, than you can imagine. In 1978, the Denver Mint was producing billions of pennies. But hidden among them, a small handful emerged with a flaw so rare, so impossible, that decades later they would send shockwaves through the coin world. A flaw invisible to most eyes, but obvious to the trained collector. One wrong detail. One minting slip. One historic accident that transformed copper and zinc into treasure. At first, nobody noticed, people spent them. Vending machines swallowed them. Some were tossed into drawers, jars, even thrown away. The Denver Mint never issued a public statement about the mishap. It was just a whisper in the halls of coin dealers, a rumor of an error that could be worth $1 million or more. And then, one day, it happened. At a small auction house in the Midwest, a 1978 D penny, worn, yet unmistakably unique, crossed the block. Bidders leaned forward. You could hear the scratch of pencils and the tapping of fingers. The starting bid was modest, but it rose with a speed that stunned the auctioneer. Two collectors locked eyes from across the room, each determined not to lose. The price leapt past $50,000, then $100, $200, and still climbing. By the time the gavel fell, the tiny coin had changed someone's life forever. That's the secret most people miss, and why, right now, there could be one sitting in your change without you even knowing it. You see, the Denver Mint in 1978 used multiple dies to stamp the Lincoln Memorial penny. And in one small batch, something went wrong. The dies were misaligned by a fraction of a millimeter, creating a subtle doubling effect on the date and lettering, what experts call a double die. On others, the mint mark itself was punched by hand, slightly tilted, slightly misplaced, making them stand apart from the billions of perfect, worthless twins, some even show faint cracks in the die, creating raised lines across the coin's surface, a sign of the metal's struggle under the immense pressure of minting. To the casual spender, these flaws are invisible. To the trained collector, they are the markings of a once-in-a-lifetime find. But here's where the story gets even wilder. One man in California reportedly found his 1978 D penny in a roll of coins from the bank, a roll he bought for just 50 cents. That single coin later sold for nearly $1.8 million. He said he almost gave it to his granddaughter for her school lunch money. Imagine handing away $1 million treasure to pay for a sandwich. Dealers are rushing to track down these rare survivors. Every time one surfaces, it fuels the frenzy even more. Collectors stay up at night, searching rolls under bright desk lamps, their eyes scanning for that tiny tilt in the mint mark or the telltale doubling in the date, and each time, they ask themselves the same question: could this be the one? Most people who have this coin don't even realize it. They drop it in tip jars, leave it in coin trays, or bury it at the bottom of a coffee can in the garage. Meanwhile, a trained set of eyes could spot it instantly and walk away with a fortune. And here's where the suspense tightens. If you think $1 million penny is too good to be true, remember this: a 1978 D penny, just 1 gram heavier than standard, with a barely visible die crack and a slightly misaligned mint mark, is the reason an entire room of collectors once gasped in disbelief. That coin wasn't gold. It wasn't silver. It wasn't even shiny, but it was history, accident, and rarity, frozen in copper. First, check the year: 1978, with the bold D mint mark just below the date. Look closely at the date and the letters Liberty and In God We Trust. Use a magnifying glass. If you see any doubling or shadowing in the letters, you may have a doubled die. Examine the mint mark. If it's slightly tilted, off-center, or appears repunched, your heart should start racing. Fourth, weigh the coin. Standard pennies from that era weigh about 3.11 grams. Anything heavier could mean a wrong planchet was used, a rare and valuable error. Finally, check for raised lines or cracks in the coin's surface. Those die cracks are like a fingerprint of the minting accident that could make your penny worth millions. And remember, there's no flashing neon sign that says rare. Sometimes it's the dullest, most ordinary-looking penny in the pile that hides the rarest story. So tonight, when you empty your pockets, pause before tossing your change aside. Hold each coin to the light, because somewhere out there, a 1978 D mint mark Lincoln penny is waiting to turn an ordinary day into the most extraordinary moment of your life. Waiting to prove that even the smallest piece of metal can carry a fortune. And who knows, this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. This coin almost slipped through history without a whisper, yet one was pulled from obscurity and stunned the collecting world by selling for nearly $2 million. Imagine a small, brown penny, the kind you've seen 1,000 times, suddenly changing someone's life forever. This is not a legend. It's not a rumor. This is the story of the 1950 D-Wheat Lincoln penny, a coin that could turn the contents of your pocket into a fortune. It all began in Denver, 1950. The U.S. Mint was producing millions of pennies, each stamped with that small but powerful D beneath Lincoln's date. They were meant to be ordinary. They were supposed to blend into the tide of currency and disappear into the hands of milkmen, paper boys, and store clerks. But somewhere along the way, something happened, something that would make a few of these pennies unlike any other. Collectors today speak of it in hushed tones. There were striking errors, minute imperfections, and minting oddities that slipped past the watchful eyes of quality control. Perhaps it was a misaligned die. Perhaps a doubled detail in Lincoln's profile. Or maybe an unusual composition left over from wartime experiments. Whatever it was, these rare survivors were born in that Denver facility, hidden among millions of their ordinary brothers, and destined for greatness. One such coin was discovered decades later, in the hands of a man who had been saving wheat pennies since his youth. He almost spent it, almost tossed it into a coin jar for the bank. But something made him pause. A tiny, almost invisible difference caught his eye. And that hesitation, that single moment of curiosity, turned into a miracle worth over $1 million. But here's where it gets stranger. For years, dealers thought the 1950 D-Wheat penny was just another common date, a filler in most collections, worth little more than its copper weight. Then auction records began to whisper a different truth. One pristine example, a flawless survivor with razor-sharp details and a shimmering red luster, sold for a price that made even veteran collectors shake their heads in disbelief. Nearly $1.9 million. For a penny. Because perfection in coins is like lightning in a bottle. Most pennies from that year were spent, worn down, their fine details erased by decades of circulation. But this single coin, was protected from time. No scratches. No discoloration. No damage from careless fingers. It was as if the day it left the Denver Mint, it vanished into a vault, waiting for its destiny. And here's the twist that sends collectors racing to their coin jars: there could be more out there. Maybe one is in an old coffee can in your garage. Maybe it's tucked into a grandparent's coin album. Maybe it's in your change right now. Well, first, the date, 1950. Then, just below it, the bold D-Mint mark for Denver. But don't stop there. Look closely, under magnification, at Lincoln's profile, the lettering, the edges. A rare doubled die could be hiding in plain sight. Some show extra thickness in the date or liberty. Others reveal subtle die cracks, those tiny raised lines in the metal that only happen when a die is overused or damaged. And condition, oh, condition is everything. The $1 million specimens are those in near-perfect mint state condition, blazing with their original copper-red shine, as if they were struck yesterday. Even the smallest scratch can drop the value drastically. Handle them only by the edges, never touch the surface, and store them in airtight holders if you think you have a gem. But there's another layer to this mystery. Some 1950 D-Wheat pennies were struck on planchets intended for earlier years, slightly different in weight or composition. These wrong planchet errors are almost impossible to spot without precise scales and testing, but if you find one, it could be worth a fortune. One collector's story still echoes through coin shows. He bought a small jar of wheat pennies at a yard sale for $5. Most were worth face value, but buried in the mix was a 1950 D unlike any he'd ever seen. Deep, rich color. Crisp detail. The kind of coin that makes your pulse race. He sent it for grading, expecting a few $100s at most. When the results came back, he nearly dropped the phone. The grading company called it one of the finest known. Months later, it hammered at auction for over $1 million, but what happened next stunned the entire coin world. That sale ignited a frenzy. Suddenly, 1950 D pennies, once ignored, became hot property. Dealers scoured their stock. Collectors doubled back through old rolls. And prices for high-grade examples skyrocketed overnight. Because they're only looking for obvious rarities, the 1909 SVDB, the 1943 copper penny. They don't realize that some of the most valuable coins in the world are the ones hiding in plain sight, their secrets invisible to the casual glance. If you want to find one, patience is your greatest ally. Search wheat penny rolls from banks. Attend estate sales. Ask older relatives if they have coin jars they haven't touched in decades. And when you find a 1950 D, treat it like it might be the one, because it just might be. Imagine the moment you realize that little copper coin in your palm isn't worth 1 cent. It's worth over $1 million. That's the magic of coin collecting. That's why hearts race at the mention of the 1950 D wheat Lincoln penny. And that's why, somewhere out there, someone's life is about to change forever. This coin almost ended up in the trash, but it sold for nearly $1 million, and the strangest part? Most people would have looked at it and thought it was just an ordinary penny die. In 1986, the United States Mint was long past the era of the wheat reverse penny. That iconic 2 wheat stalks design had been retired back in 1958, replaced with the Lincoln Memorial. By the mid-80s, nobody expected to ever see a wheat design in circulation again, and yet, somewhere, in the middle of a routine year, a single batch of pennies was struck that defied all expectations, a batch with no mint mark, and the wrong reverse design. It shouldn't exist, it wasn't supposed to exist, and yet, one man, digging through his pocket change on a rainy afternoon, found it. Collectors were stunned when the photos hit the coin forums. They thought it had to be a fake. The date clearly read 1986. The obverse was pure Lincoln, sharp, crisp, but flip it over, and there it was, the unmistakable wheat stalks. A design unseen for nearly 3 decades. And in the spot where a mint mark should have been, nothing. A flawless, empty space. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Word spread fast. Coin dealers began calling each other late at night, trying to confirm the rumors. Some swore they had heard whispers about a minting experiment gone wrong. Others believed a rogue mint employee had slipped a handful of old dies into production. And then, the first auction appearance changed everything. When the hammer dropped, the price soared far beyond anyone's wildest guess. Not hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of thousands of dollars. By the time bidding stopped, that little copper disc had reached the kind of number most people only see in lottery dreams. Nearly $1 million for a penny, and here's where it gets even stranger. Every coin collector knows about transitional errors, coins struck with designs or compositions from the wrong year. But this was in a league of its own. Imagine a coin from a year that never had wheatbacks, suddenly appearing in pristine condition, with the older design perfectly centered and sharply struck. It was like finding a brand new Model T Ford rolling off the assembly line in 1986. It made no sense, theories multiplied. Some said it came from leftover dies accidentally paired with a modern obverse. Others whispered about an inside job, a private minting for a retiring employee, never meant to leave the building. But the truth? The truth is still shrouded in mystery, and that mystery is why collectors are willing to pay anything to own one. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on any example they can find. The problem? So far, only a few verified coins have surfaced. Some are in private hands, tucked away in safes, never to be sold. Others sit in graded holders, their copper surfaces glowing like a frozen moment in history. Each one is a time capsule, a physical contradiction that shouldn't exist, yet does. But here's where it gets even more heart-stopping for you. If even a single one of these coins escaped into circulation, it could be sitting in a jar of pennies in someone's kitchen right now. It could be hiding in an old coffee can in your garage. It could be resting in a change drawer in a dusty old register at a mom-and-pop store that hasn't been cleaned out in decades. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. Yours could too, but most people miss the key detail, and without it, you could hold this exact penny in your hand and never know. So listen carefully. First, check the date. It must be 1986. No exceptions. Second, look for the mint mark, or rather, the absence of one. This coin has no P for Philadelphia, no D for Denver, no S for San Francisco. The space beneath the date will be completely blank. And finally, flip it over. The reverse should not show the Lincoln Memorial. Instead, it must display the two wheat stalks curving around the sides, framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, just like the classic design from the early 20th century. If all three signs match, the 1986 date, the missing mint mark, and the wheat reverse, you may be holding one of the most valuable pennies in history. And now, don't rush to spend it or toss it in with the rest of your change. If you ever find one, protect it immediately. Place it in a coin flip or holder, avoid touching the surfaces, and contact a trusted coin grading service. Only authenticated, top-grade examples have broken the $1 million barrier, but even a circulated piece could be worth tens of thousands. Collectors dream of discoveries like this. It's the thrill of the hunt, the hope that the next handful of change could rewrite their financial future. And for a lucky few, that dream has come true in the form of a tiny copper coin from 1986 that defies logic, history, and the odds. So the next time you hear pennies clinking in your pocket, listen closely. One of them might just be whispering $1 million secret, because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. This coin almost ended up tossed into a coin jar, but just weeks later, it stunned the coin world when it sold for over $1 million. It was an ordinary day in Denver in 1987. The US Mint was striking billions of Lincoln pennies, the same coin Americans had been using for decades, and yet, somewhere in that sea of copper-plated zinc, a handful of mistakes slipped through the machines. Mistakes so small that most eyes would never see them. One of those mistakes would change a man's life forever. He didn't know it then. It jingled in his pocket like any other penny. He used it to pay for coffee, he dropped it on the counter, he passed it along, but weeks later, a collector spotted something off. A tiny, almost invisible difference, and that difference would turn a 1-cent coin into $1 million miracle. But what could possibly make a 1987 Lincoln penny worth up to $1.10 million? It comes down to a minting error so rare that even veteran coin dealers have gone years without seeing one in person. During the striking process, the Denver Mint's precision machines misaligned just enough to create a double die, but not the dramatic, obvious kind. This was a subtle doubling on Lincoln's eye and on the date itself, a detail so faint that it blends into the design unless light hits it just right. And yet, for collectors, this tiny imperfection is like a diamond hidden in gravel. Because it shouldn't exist at all. In 1987, quality control was tightening across U.S. Mint's errors were being caught quickly, defective coins pulled from circulation before they could reach the public. Just a precious few made it out. They passed through vending machines, laundromats, cash registers, until one day, a sharp-eyed collector saw the glint of something unusual and refused to let it pass. Collectors were shocked, news traveled fast, whispers spread in coin clubs, hushed conversations in antique shops. Could an everyday 1987 penny from Denver be worth over $1 million? And then came the proof. An uncirculated example of the coin, flawless in color, untouched by time, was put up for auction. The bids started slow, 500, 1,000, 10,000. Then something happened. The numbers began to climb like wildfire. Collectors were in a frenzy, and when the hammer finally dropped, the coin had reached an unbelievable figure, just over $1.10 million. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. The publicity caused everyday people to start checking their change. Old coffee cans were emptied, piggy banks smashed open, coin dealers saw lines forming at their shops. People clutching handfuls of 1987 pennies, hoping to strike gold. Most left disappointed, but a few walked away with checks they'd never dreamed of cashing, because this coin is not just about the date or the mint mark. It's about the subtle, telltale signs only a trained eye can spot. On the 1987 D-mint mark penny, look closely at the number 7 and the date. On rare $1 million examples, you'll see a soft shadow, a double outline that shouldn't be there. Lincoln's profile may also show a faint second image, almost ghost-like, especially around his eye and jawline, and condition matters more than you think. Circulated examples, worn and dull, can still fetch thousands, but pristine, uncirculated examples with blazing original luster, those are the ones that can push toward that jaw-dropping $1 million mark. One man's pocket change became a life-changing fortune, because he didn't ignore the details. Dealers are still hunting for them, collectors dream of finding one in a forgotten coin roll, and the truth is, you could have one right now and not even know it. So tonight, when you empty your pockets, when you dump those pennies into a jar, stop, look closer, tilt it under a light, search for that doubling, because the next time you do, you might just be holding a coin worth more than $1 million. And remember, this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million.